Alright, time for another draft physics video conversation. Yes, well, except there's no one to converse with. Yes, they're all cowards. They won't answer any of the questions. They won't accept any of the context of a conversation about where physics might have gone wrong and where some notions they have might be incorrect. They won't allow their physics to be challenged, and they certainly won't meet any challenge. They'll run away desperately. So I did make a video asking how much I have to pay you, and just for the record, no one, not a single response from anyone regarding any price. So even for $1 billion, they won't do it. It's really that bad. So the only way it is to create some sort of pressure to obligate physics to save its reputation. So there has to be enough noise made where they are obligated to respond. And unfortunately, that's going to take decades at this rate on YouTube, and so that's unfortunate. So until I can get some of you people to be reasonable and say, yes, okay, I get it, it really is a conversation worth having, and we have to provoke the conversation because they are in fact cowards, it's not going to happen. Frankly, you have to create the pressure. I can't do it. You have to do it. There has to be enough of a crowd for the media to show up. There has to be some sort of drama for the media to show up, that kind of thing. Or, yes, it's a silent event. And that's sort of up to you people. I can't, like I said, I can only provide the reasoning. I can't force you to be reasonable. So I've gone over the terrible history of the kinetic energy formula, completely provoked as a hostility to physics, science, that didn't have enough God in it. That's exactly Leibniz's critique. And Leibniz is exactly the character who's Newton's worst enemy in life. So this is not Newton's physics. This is Leibniz's physics. And it's kind of funny that you people they don't even put the real name on it, right? They don't even have kinetic energy associated with the guy who started this slop. And then some French aristocrats picked up the idea who were also not traditional religious, but certainly new agers, and they wanted physics to be, to provide them with energy or fuel for their magical theories of reality. And somehow, because they were rich, they sold this idea because they were able to propagandize it, and that's all they did do. And then very unscientifically, they quote mine the evidence that exists to create the impression that this physics was somehow real. Clay experiments. I've been over that so many times, I won't be that redundant. But anyway, and then in the 1800s, it was just contrived. They needed mathematics to contrive it. They had to fix it because it was preposterously wrong, not just ludicrously wrong, however you make the comparison. It was really, really, really stupid. Instead of being just silly, it was really, really, really stupid. The numbers were so exaggerated. So they contrived mathematics to try to force this into the rational physics package, and they are just contrivances. Nonsense where they conveniently switch between measuring something, the distance something travels versus the time something is exposed to something, which are very different things and can be understood so simply. It's just really, really stupid. All right, and then and so then we're stuck in the modern age where they just can't get rid of any of their mistakes. They can't correct them. They never corrected Ben Franklin's bad guess at plus and minus. Huge flaw, really, in the physics, and they can't fix it, because they're stuck in their traditions, and they don't know how to They don't know how to fix it without breaking it. That's part of the problem too, I would suspect. And so they've become completely dependent on this notion that somehow there's two kinds of energy. Momentum, the one Newton knew about, the one that worked, the one that predicted everything quite accurately, and this new modern, fun kinetic thing. that doesn't really serve any purpose but create preposterous amounts of free energy in the universe. Yeah, it really, it's just a story. It's just a fable. It has zero continuity. It doesn't fit. Doesn't make any sense. It breaks their own rules. Completely screws up any notion of Newton's 3 laws that they think are sacred. Well, they're not sacred if you take them seriously. And you recognize the simple fact that mv squared is a replacement. 1/2 mv squared is a replacement for momentum as a definition of energy, clearly. Momentum would have no meaning if you take away the notion that it has something to do with something's capacity to move things in the environment, to do work. It was completely, that's what F equals ma means. I mean, force means doing work. That's what a force does. That's what makes a force significant, is that it can do work. That it has to. That's by definition what it does. It wouldn't be a force if it didn't do anything, or if it didn't have potential to do something. So it's clear Newton thought momentum was energy, and if I pose that statement, what's the counter argument? See, we haven't gotten one. So that's why there has to be a debate, is because the cowards won't answer the pertinent questions. What do they think Newton thought momentum was if he didn't think it was energy? If he didn't think it was the capacity of something that has movement and it can make other things move by interacting with them. And it's proportional to their masses and their velocities. And that's how much energy you're going to go. You have a certain amount of energy in, you get a certain amount of energy out. And that's conservation laws. What do you think when he meant equal and opposite reactions? What, he thought the reactions were magical? Like, depending on what form of velocity and mass you put together, you could somehow get more energy? He didn't think any of that. All right, well, anyway. So I've asked a bunch of questions. I think I'll put them in the description of all these videos from now on. The unanswered questions, the paradoxes created by the silly theory. And it's completely unevidenced. So clearly what's well evidenced is conservation of momentum. I've shown the experiments. And you can't create any evidence for kinetic energy without proposing that momentum doesn't work, that it isn't conserved. You can't, you can't have your kinetic, your kinetic energy cake and momentum too. The two are directly opposing theories of reality. The universe is a different place if one works and the other one doesn't. Fact. So, this is an important science. This is an important part of the credibility of science, physics in particular. And they're running from their obligation to shore up, to fix what are, until they correct them, obviously glaring problems with their theory. And so that's where we are. I mean, this should be, everybody should be voting for, yes, let's have the answers. Let's have more experiments. Let's prove it. Everybody should be voting for that. But clearly there's a bunch of people who don't want that to happen. Because they're going to lose. They're going to lose big. And science is going to have to take a hit as being potentially incredibly sloppy. That many of the facts proposed by science, expanding universes, dark matter, all kinds of crap, entanglement, quantum computing, all kinds of shit, will become very suspect. Anyway, so a troll who, he always has to go, the first couple of comments are, okay, they're acceptably within the bounds of fair enough, but he always has to push it. So he always has to go to some point where I'll have to just block him because he's just a pathetic liar. All right. So I'll just read my response because it has his comment in it. Save a little bit of time. All right. So he says, not that any of this stuff matters since you're just some kook talking into a webcam in somebody's cellar. So again, this should be the argument from totally irrelevant. The irrelevancy fallacy. Um, this isn't the way anything is done, is by only listen to the police officers about what's ethical. No, I don't think so. So I say blah blah patent office. I mean, obviously Einstein wasn't a highly credentialed participant, and and I think Einstein was wrong anyway. So it's not like which part of your authority proves anything. Oh, that's right, none of it. And so that's just an irrelevant shot of meaningless. Has no meaning, no substance. Doesn't change the simple questions. Doesn't change the fact that I'm offering $2,000 for a credible scientist to prove me wrong. $2,000, and none of them want the money for something so easy to do. Anyway. But if the lighter, faster roll of coins was experiencing friction, whereas the larger, slow one was rolling, that would actually slow the lighter one down. So this is the argument I made was that if you're rolling objects, you're using some of their momentum to cause them to roll. So they lose velocity. Okay, now they've stored the energy as a different kind of motion. And that motion isn't going to be collected by, say, a spring. If something's rolling and it hits a spring, the roll is just going to cause friction with the spring. It's not going to cause the spring to compress. So any of the energy that was converted into angular momentum of spinning something isn't going to be as collectible as the energy of the actual momentum, the movement in one direction. So the more it's moving in some other direction, the less likely you are to collect it. But it isn't any different in theory than any other circumstance where energy is always being sliced off in directions. If you can keep the energy going forward, it goes forever. Okay, in theory. It's only because the energy is parsed off into other directions, into other motions, that we don't collect it and therefore say, we lost energy. No, you didn't lose any because energy is always conserved. It's in the environment. You put it somewhere in some other direction. That's all that happened. But there is no extra mv squared amount of energy. Anyway, so I say that's why they invented anti-like brakes, because skidding makes things go slower. So the argument is obviously faster things incur less friction. So the faster you can make something go, the less friction is going to be effective against it, okay, in most cases. Now, the cornstarch example is a counter example in the sense that the faster something's going, the more friction it's going to incur. But that's a special circumstance. And again, just like clay is a special circumstance. And a scientist knows that, yes, different substances react different ways and impose a different environment. And, that's why they're scientists, is they're supposed to only be able to understand those things. So anyway, continuing. Because skinning makes you go slower, question mark. So I'm making fun of his point by just pointing out, obviously, skidding is making something go faster, not slower. If it was going slower, then everybody'd say skidding is great. Why do we want to change it? You really don't understand the subject at all. And that's just the truth of it. He doesn't want to think, but that's the physics they teach. I'm going to play a clip of Professor Lewin, hopefully, in this video where he's explaining kinetic energy, and it's completely impossible to understand what the fuck he's talking about. He has no clue how energy works in the universe at all. I mean, again, let's go back to their mathematics where, he goes like, well, there's no momentum because something leaves here going 50 miles an hour and something left here going 50 miles an hour. There's no momentum. But he's not going to say there's no kinetic energy, even though the kinetic energy is going this way and going that way. Why doesn't the kinetic energy cancel out? Why don't we say it has zero kinetic energy? There's absolutely no good reason. There's no way to make any sense out of that nonsense. Clearly, the energy, when it's in the form of kinetic energy, it's doing exactly the same thing momentum's doing. It's got exactly as much arrow in it as, vectorness to it as anything else. It's obvious which way the energy's going. It's not going in any direction. So why don't they just cancel it out and say there's zero momentum? I mean, they're effectively saying, you know, in a system where a rocket's taking off or something, oh, there's zero momentum to start with, and there's zero momentum later because the force of gravity is going down, and the rocket's going up, and you know, it's zero momentum until it lifts off. You know, I mean, it's just horseshit. Anyway. And the large, slow one would hardly slow down at all. So again, as has been pointed out, friction, well, I'll just say it. Of course, you have it exactly backwards. Things evade friction. Slow things pay the full price. So fast things evade friction. Slow things pay the full price. So the slower you're going, the more likely. This will come up in a, you know, I'll read a couple of Stephen Bro comments, but, you know, I mean, I've made the point so many times. I mean, if say you're shooting through like rain, okay, so there's rain of gravity, we'll just call it that, and you have a bucket, all right, and you're just going to collect the gravity. So if you go from here to here, you know, at a certain speed slowly, I can go really, really slow. I could go, you know, I could take 3 days to move something from point A, okay, to point B. Well, if I have the bucket sitting here in the rain for 3 days, it's going to collect a lot of stuff in the bucket. That's a lot of energy I'm going to collect. A lot of energy I have to oppose. And obviously, the faster I get the bucket to point B, the less energy, the less opposing energy I'll need to use because I will collect so little rain, right? So the faster I go, the less I pay for it. So let's say I give it a super fast velocity. Well, unfortunately, the super fast velocity means I'll end up at point E or F or G, right? Or let's point X. I go so fast, I end up at point X. You know, so there's point C and D and E. Well, the fact is, though, that the bucket, the amount of energy I used to get to point B, when I used velocity that got me to point X, the amount of rain in the bucket will be almost zero. I mean, if I can go really fast, I'll get to point B and I'll use almost no energy to get there. Now, yeah, I'll go a whole lot further and I'll use more energy in total because I went billions of miles further. But the fact is, the energy I used to get from A to B was going to be a tiny portion, just almost nothing. So the faster you go into gravity, the less energy you use. So it's similar to, you know, punching the block of wood. The faster you hit it, the less energy it will take to break it. And those are just facts. The more efficient it is in terms of what you'll get as the outcome. Yes, you'll have a bunch of extra energy after you break it, but the amount of energy to break the wood, the amount the wood absorbs, will be smaller and smaller the faster and faster you go. So these are just basic, simple concepts. I mean, they can't get this. They can't figure this part out that, well, if I go really slow, if I lift a weight really slow, I use a lot more energy to lift it than if I lift it quickly. The faster I get out of the gravity, that is, I nullify the gravity, the sooner I nullify the gravity, you know, the less work I have to do. Fact. Okay. So that's really dumb of you to think that works in your favor. So of course, you know, if you take the science seriously, you'll understand that you know, it does make a huge difference when you're rolling objects, you know, versus skidding objects versus speed of the object. You know, all of these things matter. All right, the facts and the scientifically credible experiments are in my favor. End of message. Anyway, so this other guy injects, and he says friction, velocity, viscosity, and drag are involved in this situation, dumb nuts, not just the item you're watching move. So he's saying that to Farley. This is Farley. Kinetic energy is involved in the situation too, nincompoop. So he just says it. Kinetic energy is involved in the situation too. Now the whole argument is that momentum worked fine. Newton was 100% correct. It is the right answer. Okay. All of his math worked. No kinetic energy in it. No squared velocities anywhere involved. you're the one saying somehow it was broken and that you saved the day with your new theory that somehow gets to the real truth. And the argument is, where's the evidence of this real truth? You're saying Jesus walked on water. And then you're saying, I have to prove Jesus didn't walk on water. No, I just have to prove that momentum always works. Anyway. Good luck splitting the atom again. So what does that have to do with anything? Who the fuck knows? So those are always the answers. It's just an evasion. Okay, all you have to say is kinetic energy. We get it, moron. Also, you forgot electromagnetic. Guess you're not there yet. Good luck with your finger paintings. So he's, this is just a back and forth. Let's see if we get to something real. So the fuckhead says, kinetic and electromagnetic, two more things you don't understand. No, the whole argument is you don't understand, and you're proving you don't understand, but you're afraid to explain what you understand. Explain to me why you think the clay experiments are good evidence and the spring experiments are bad evidence. Fortunately for me, real science is decided by evidence, not mob rule. So a hilarious counter argument in the sense that that's exactly what you're guilty of. Yours is the mob rule, okay? The popular people all jumped on a bandwagon. Yours is the science of populism. Yours isn't the science of rigorous, serious, disciplined physics. You're the one against Newton and for the religious kook. Clearly, that's the side you've chosen. All right. And clearly, you don't have any of this stuff called evidence, or you'd show me this evidence. All right. Notice you left out the elaborate energy. Good job, you're learning. So again, the word energy is valid, that we have a better term than quantity of motion. But, clearly that's what Newton was saying. Quantity of motion meant energy. So everywhere where Newton said quantity of motion, you could just replace it with the word energy. All right, no one understands those entirely. Well, I don't think it's that hard to follow the bouncing ball. You're just following the movement of subatomic particles in a sense. And you're recognizing that, well, some of the movement is constant. So you're not going to break the atoms themselves, the molecules. So you don't do that when you're just interacting in common experiences. Now, what you can do is change some of the chemistry, because you'll heat things and melt things, and so you will change some of the chemical interactions. But substantially, you're just moving where the matter is, its location. You're not changing, you're not doing a bunch of chemistry, all right, in most of these interactions. You're just moving the physical atoms to different locations. And you're going to do that based on how much movement they have. So they go in with a certain amount of movement, and all of that movement goes somewhere. And it's either transferred, successfully from one object to another, or it's dissipated into movement of clay atoms. We can understand what Okay, no one understands those entirely. We can understand what we see only and interpret. You are a low truck driver or something. A tow truck driver. Are you a tow truck driver or something? So I don't. This wasn't very effective insulting in my opinion, but whatever. So you have contempt for tow truck drivers. Apparently the only people you respect are lowlifes that slander scientists in basements they don't pay rent for. So it's another stupid accusation that I'm somehow not paying my bills, which is just absolute made up lies. And where have I slandered any scientists? So please, let's talk about that slander. Where have I slandered somebody? So, these are the questions we don't get any answers to. Over and over again, we don't get any answers. All right, so there was another part here. Let's see, he replied 3 times here, so good. Well, so we'll play we'll do this one too. You are on video saying you'd pay anybody that did the experiment. So clearly I did make videos. I haven't deleted. Well, I'll wait till he makes that accusation, I guess. There was always a context. There's always a context. Everything I say has a context. You can ignore that if you're cheaters and liars and stinkers, or you can recognize there's a context and the real subject, is the context. So clearly I made the offer. I made the offer for well, I'll say it. That's just another of your lies. I clearly pointed out the terms like experiment would have to be professionally done, and I clearly didn't agree to pay anyone for anything for anything they threw together. So it wasn't like I just said, go ahead and do experiments and I'll pay you for all of them. No, clearly I was going to contract with somebody to do an experiment. We'd have to have agreement, okay? And that there would have to be agreement on conditions. Clearly that's the terms. I never promised to give any asshole who makes any kind of crappy video money. That's just ludicrous. All right. Also, you called me an identity thief in your comments. Let me clear my throat. Went running this morning. Did me a lot of good. All right. Okay, you all call me identity thief. I probably should wait till I have a voice. Alright, should be close enough. Also, you called me an identity thief in your comments, and I have screenshots, so I find that hilarious. Yeah, good. I'm glad you have some. The fraudulent acquisition and use of a person's private identifying information, usually for financial gain. And so I point out, I bet no judge would accept your limited definition. So obviously some technical definition of identity thief in a, there's so many ways to steal somebody's identity now, so many places to steal. You can steal their credit card, but you can also, again, pretend to be them online. So a judge is clearly going to understand, oh yeah, if I had a YouTube account, some guy stole my image and stole all the videos on my account and tried to duplicate my account so he could fool people into thinking I said these stupid, lousy, rotten things. He essentially signed my name to crap I didn't sign. He would know that was identity theft. Signing your name, his name, to crap on the internet. Clearly our icons are our signature, and you're stealing somebody's signature. Clearly, a judge is going to understand that retard. Anyway, clearly you duplicating someone else's account on YouTube is reasonably qualified as identity theft. Anyway, so that is every bit as slanderous as what I called you. No, you said I didn't pay my bills and that I defrauded somebody. I didn't do any such thing. Even the average man on the street wouldn't buy that argument, I say. Except what I said was actually true. And so I just point out again that, thanks again for providing proof of your intention to lie about the truth. Because clearly the only way you get out of slander is to say, in some, like ignorance isn't even a good enough excuse because you really are obligated to have evidence. But you can make some argument that in your own head you didn't think it was a lie. Okay? But you're clearly saying overtly, okay, that you intended to imply exactly what you stated. You intended to state that you had some good reason to believe I haven't paid a bill. And you have absolutely no good reason to believe that ever happened. Ever. Okay, so you're clearly just lying. All right, and for a malicious purpose. So you're just proving the case for me. Thank you. All right, so then he says, your original video, which you seem to have deleted. So again, just another false accusation. You have no right to say, oh, it seems like it was deleted when there's absolutely no evidence that I've ever deleted anything. So again, a lie. But which I copied to my hard drive. So yes, you can have a copy of every video I made, and guess what? It'll be every video I've made is still on YouTube. I have not taken off of YouTube any videos. There's only one video that I made unlisted. Okay, I didn't even make it private. I just unlisted it because it was a stupid video. I made a mistake, and it gives the wrong impression. So there's absolutely no good value in leaving the video as one of my videos because I don't believe what was in the video. Okay, but that's it. The only other videos taken down were the ones you had taken down, the ones you spammed and blackballed, and YouTube took down. So you're the one who's deleting content on the internet, not me. Okay, said nothing about conditions, liar. So there's an overt statement that isn't true. I didn't make any open-ended statement to the internet. I didn't say to the internet, do experiments and I'll pay you. I didn't say anything like that. There's absolutely no open-ended, I'll just pay you to do experiments. Any kind of experiment. Doesn't matter how you do it. You know, tie a string to a cat and, lift it up from gravity by its tail. Fine, I'll pay you for it. No. So it's just a silly, stupid lie. All right. Anyway. All right. If calling you a criminal and a scammer is slander, then so is accusing me. so it's just amazing. He's still going back to this. He's not an identity thief when he steals somebody else's identity. That is when he impersonates their account and then types comments on the internet trying to fool people into thinking this credible person said the crap he's saying. He doesn't think that's identity theft. He doesn't think a reasonable person would call that identity theft when it's obviously identity theft. You've put on a face mask, you've put on their clothes, you've dressed yourself as them. You're clearly stealing their identity. You stole their image for your icon. I mean, it's so fucking obvious. You're an identity thief. Okay, and you called me identity thief first, bozo. No, the fact is you called me something first, and I pointed out how, why are we taking anything? Why am I even responding to somebody who steals people's identity, and he's going to give me ethics lessons? All right, the logic shouldn't be too hard. Well, you fail again. P.S. You should look up the definition of free speech sometime. Yeah, you should look up the definition of slander sometimes, because that's the condition to your free speech. You have the freedom to speak. But if you're going to say something, okay, that is a lie, that is fire, fire. See, you can yell fire in a crowded theater if there's a fucking fire. If there's no fire, you're going to jail, asshole. So you can say, well, I had the freedom to speak it. Yeah, and and you're going to go to jail for it, okay? So that's the price of you exercising your freedom recklessly. So there's nothing in the First Amendment that gives you the right. There's no freedom to lie. There's a freedom to speak, to say things, okay? To say things that are even offensive. But the fact is that we have another law that says, but yeah, you can't lie. So you're free to speak as long as you're telling the truth. Your freedom to speak will be protected by the federal government as long as you're telling the fucking truth. All right. Hey, Farley, do you not recognize how much of a loser these comments make you look? Well, they do to some people. Obviously, yeah, it's just a haters club, so the haters will just grab onto whatever they can grab onto. So any kind of insults work for them. That's how the internet works. That's how people work, unfortunately. They're really small-minded, and small. They have small things, small minds and small other things. Okay. So kinetic energy with, this is an old, I thought this was an old one. This is 1 day ago edited. So he edited a comment a day ago that he posted like a week ago. I don't know. How does this say 1 day too? Well, anyway, that's the NASA stuff is just nonsense. Absolutely no evidence provided. So where's the other garbage comments? There was some here somewhere. All right, here's the asshole again. Okay, you guys are still pandering those absolute jokes of an experiment around. So at least this guy gets that the Stephen Bro experiments, again, they should be disqualified just for filth alone. Think on that for a moment, that this is the best you've got. Backyard hackneyed experiments by a YouTuber with a vendetta. And zero details on how they were performed, how the velocities were confirmed, or any additional detail on mechanisms. That's pathetic, honestly. and it doesn't bode well for the theory and its demonstrated paradoxes at all. Well, it clearly is pretty. So this is a substantial part of physics. This mv squared, again, 350-year-old theory, and they can't just link us to really good evidence of it. They can't show us the 8-pound ball going twice as fast, knocking down twice as many pins. They can't show us any examples of this extra kinetic energy actually knocking shit down, making more of anything, including heat. They can't show us a single clinical experiment where we see the kinetic energy difference. Two things with the same momentum doing more work. One of them does more work than the other one. They can't show us one single frickin' experiment where that actually happens. I mean, that is amazing. All right. So then he says, and your side has zero evidence. So, of course, we don't have zero evidence. We have the theory of momentum and the fact that it is conserved, and the experiments show that. That momentum is a real thing. It's real energy. It does create, if you are, I can show in the experiments that if you are causing heat, or you're making sound, or in some way you're disturbing the environment, you're roughing up a surface, you're incurring friction, that you're losing momentum. That your momentum is what's being absorbed by the environment. That friction isn't some kind of counter force. Friction is you losing your force. Okay, that's what friction is. Friction is you transferring your momentum to a surface. It isn't some surface harassing you. All right. Not that friction can't be in the form of a counter force. Friction can be both static and active. So you can have a stream, or you can have just water. So even if we only had hackneyed backyard experiments, even that's still better than zero evidence. So of course there's not zero evidence for momentum's conservation or for momentum as being energy. There's a plethora of evidence that I have shown the evidence. What you have is another theory, and you've shown no evidence for it. You've shown nothing. You haven't shown one experiment where momentum fails to get right answers, nor have you shown any experiment where your kinetic energy is demonstrated to exist. Okay, which is what you have. So again, they're the one with no evidence. This is just such a bullshit argument. By the way, since you do so-called atheist resort, so since when do so-called atheists resort to creationist arguments? So again, yours is the religious argument, clearly. You're the one telling me this special stuff exists and being able to show absolutely no evidence for it. Newton's physics worked. That's proven. Reliable, worked, answered the questions correctly. You're saying he didn't answer the questions correctly. He needs this other theory. Okay, but you have no evidence of where Newton was wrong, and he got a wrong answer. So that's the part you need to explain. You're doing exactly what creationists do. Now, you're doing exactly what religious people do. Propose a theory and provide no evidence for it. And oblige the other side to prove your God doesn't exist. I have to somehow prove your kinetic energy theory wrong. All I can do is prove momentum is right. I can't prove your nonsense to be wrong. I can just prove it to be a fantasy for which you have no evidence. All right. They attack the methodology of actual science. So again, there's no methodology here to attack, in the sense that obviously the methodology is bad. That's the whole point. The physics is terrible. Leibniz had no physical evidence. This is, again, something he wanted to believe in. Okay, and he didn't make any real world hard scientific arguments. He just made gravity arguments. And again, gravity is just friction. You're cheating. Okay, so anyway, instead go out and find evidence. Well, where have you found any evidence? Where did you go out and create any evidence? I'm the one suggesting we do the experiments you wouldn't do. The ones that might show your energy if it existed. So I'm the one forcing you to take Jesus out on the water and show him walking. That contradicts evolution. So anyway, this is such a disgusting You know, this is like him stealing people's identity, is to pretend he's the one fighting for the reasoned arguments, you know, the scientific method, when he's the one with no evidence and just telling us it's the truth. Believe in my fable. Okay, it's unfalsifiability and shifting the burden of proof as you've done here. So again, there's no shift of the burden of proof. Just show me one tiny piece of evidence and you win. So this argument's always just hinged on you being able to come up with one credible experiment. All you keep doing is holding up your Faro cell. You know, all you keep doing is saying, and you're ignoring the fact that I've already dissected your Faro cell and taken all its magic powers away. So it's the illusion of its visual illusion has already been destroyed by people like AB Science. So you don't even have that as a weapon. You don't have any. The clay experiments have been debunked. You can't use them over and over again and say we proved it. We proved it. You don't prove anything. And the experiment well done proves you exactly wrong. All right. So the Burton guy says, we don't have any evidence for the conservation of momentum, question mark. What? So obviously momentum is well established as functional, as meaningful, as representing something real, a real quality that matter has, and that it obeys these very basic Newtonian rules. The one you haven't established or proven is that your silly kinetic energy has anything to do with anything Newtonian. That's all that DS is claiming in this particular argument. Well, I'm claiming until somebody shows me some other definition of energy, momentum is energy, as Newton said. You are the ones claiming that an 8-pound object moving 16 miles an hour will have twice as much energy as a 16-pound object moving 8 miles an hour. That's the one they'll never show us any example of anything with those proportions. They'll never show us the heavy train going slow, moving less in the world, doing less work than the light train going fast. Sorry. The burden of proof is on you for that. And all you have is these backyard hackneyed experiments with a guy with a vendetta and clear bias. So then he calls that a straw man fallacy. So it's an overt accusation for which you have no response. That's not a fallacy. That's called a good answer, a good response. Okay. Nobody is denying the existence of momentum, dumbass. Well, that's a lie right there. I mean, a preposterous lie. Pirro's clearly saying momentum isn't conserved. He's clearly arguing that the fast things can't be made to go fast. Okay, that, Professor Lewin is wrong. Okay, there isn't the same momentum going this way as going that way. The lighter object isn't able to manifest its momentum. It can only go 1.4 the speed. It can't go twice the speed. Those are direct assertions being made by people on your side. So you're just overtly lying and not taking responsibility for the argument. In Stephen Bro's own video, he says both things. He starts the video by saying, yes, it's twice the velocity, and he ends the video by saying, because of the spring argument, no, it doesn't go nearly as fast. Okay? I put the half as light thing on the spring, and he's overtly saying, that's why he wrote Gary's cheat over the experiment, that the faster thing isn't going twice as fast. He's overtly challenging everybody, saying that. Now, he didn't measure the speeds because his experiments suck. And that's one of the reasons they suck, is because he doesn't have any of those important details. All right. So, enough of that. And then we'll move on to some other crap. Yeah, it should be back. So, more troll kind of crap from Stephen Bro's channel. So they're, I don't know, Thomas Skygenberg or something, Can You See? So, and then, I don't even know what, so somebody was supposed to know what that was a reference to. Apparently that's this silly song in the background of Stephen's video, right? So this crap. I'm going to call it, just because, you know, it's, well, this is a commercial. It's crap too. Oh, it'll play after the ad. How cool is that? Thanks for that link. All right, sorry. I should have. This is what means something to Steve, right? And to me, this just first now it sounds already it's kind of gay. La 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 la. Now it's getting even gayer. Okay, really gay. So I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. This isn't like anything like Linda Ronstadt or something. I don't get it. Okay, so I just want to point that out. It sounds kind of gay to me. But, you know, whatever. And then we go with the comments. So he says, I think this version would annoy Gary more, though. So this version has the girls in the background. Now, he put different girls in the background. So he's basically copying the creativity of somebody else. Because we all know what a feminist he is. Yeah, that's a philosophical subject, okay? I am a male, and I'm attracted to pretty things, you know, women. But that shouldn't be controlling what I think a woman is and what a woman is capable of. So, yes, I think women should have the freedom not to be baby incubators or to be, you know, they shouldn't have to, they should be able to freely choose what they want to do with their brain and body. And the free choice doesn't come for most women in the world. They aren't given that free choice. Some of them are actually sold as children to be sex slaves. These are facts. And so I'm opposed to anything that confines women to a role. That's my feminism. But I don't think that because a woman says she's a scientist, that means she did the work. Because some of them obviously didn't. And they are women scientists. They're not being scientists. They're being women in the sense that they're playing an emotional game and throwing a lot of their emotions into the science and all that kind of crap. Just like a man shouldn't do man science. Okay, Homer Simpson science. Like you. Anyway, so anyway, I just thought this would be funny. This was funny. It would be offensive to him to see a woman in her undies. So this is a guy who says things like that. I mean, just the way he says that. I don't think I said undies in my whole life, frankly. Undies. I don't think I ever said the word undies. So right there. Signal. You're signaling. Okay. Even if he did use to perv over women. So he thinks finding women attractive is perving over women. Oh, I see. In his videos. Yeah, so I've pointed out that I'm distracted by women. It's just being a male thing. I mean, it's a biological thing. It just happens. Okay, not my fault. Okay, that was before he took his vows. So again, you know, there's no vow I took. There was no point where I changed my philosophy. I always had empathy for women and their circumstance because, as I pointed out, I had 3 sisters. And I saw that women are better. They're tougher. They have to endure so much more. Bullshit. Okay? It's just a fact. And so every break you can cut women, I want to cut them the break. I think they deserve to be cut breaks. But again, you don't let them drive the bus if they really don't have the license. Okay, so anyway. Just too stupid. So somewhere in here is, yeah, this is the one more relevant to the subject, I suppose. Oh, sorry. My run allergies, I guess. Since Gary wants to dismiss energy in favor of momentum, let's understand that's what Newton wanted. Okay, that was the original theory. Descartes and Newton, two of the cornerstones of physics. That's what they thought. And you're the one who wants to change it to some special thing that didn't predict Halley's Comet and didn't do any of the stuff Newton did. Okay, so you're the one who's got the problem with the physics. You can ask him how much momentum it will take to lift a shipment of coffee beans weighing 250 kilograms from -1 to +9 meters. As if there could be such a thing as a -1 meter. So just more absolute crap. you know, how do exactly I do that without digging a hole? If I dig a hole, then that's the new zero. It's not. There's no -1 meter. So just more, just playing games. I think he will start shouting again. There's no shouting, and beyond the points of God, you're that crazy and that stupid. So again, we're back to the simple argument. If I lift this slowly, I am physically going to do more work. If I lift it quickly from here to here, I will physically do less work. Those are just facts, idiot. Okay, because it's gravity and it's a constant force. Interactions between objects are not gravitational. There's no gravity inside of a car moving and another car moving. The energy they have, that is the different vectors of velocity they have absolutely nothing to do with a constant force. They have to do with an amount, a volume of energy they can take in a direction. And you're just too stupid. So that's why your physics is so bad, is because you're an example of just how idiotic your notion of what energy is. You don't have any rational notion of what the forces are or what the energy is. I mean, do you really think it's bent space? Jeez. Oh, too stupid. Anyway, so Stephen, who knows nothing about the subject, ignores the subject, essentially. Well, seeing that Gary snoops the comments, so again, the snooping, okay, because I know somebody's going to type garbage on your comments, lies, and I want to see what kind of lies they're telling. I'm snooping. So you make public comments, and they're not supposed to be public to the person you're talking about. That's the last person who should see the comments, so that is the actual person who you're talking about. Anyway, for comments to exploit to make new crappy videos about, so whatever. I'd rather make a video about you producing some sort of thing called evidence. But you can't do that in any kind of form that any serious, reasonable person could find acceptable. Short on ideas or what? So again, there's no shortage. There's a request for you to answer my questions, which you haven't done because you're incompetent and incapable. Okay, or to answer the challenges to your silly experiments, which are silly experiments. Where did you verify that staples glued together is a great way to measure energy? Yeah, where was that established? Anyway, then the chances he will see this question anyway, but probably avoid it if it involves any mathematics. So again, more arguments about how I avoid questions on math. I've already pointed out that, I overtly tell you I can't understand the math, in the sense it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to put velocity in the equation twice. Why are you multiplying a velocity times a velocity? You multiply velocity, you multiply distances times velocities. You don't multiply velocity times velocity. Okay. I'm not so great at mathematics either, so you're conceding your point. You don't know any better, yet you'll judge. Okay. But at least I don't pretend to be like he does. So again, there's no pretending. Okay, I was, rather, some of the best grades I got in school were in, algebra, advanced algebra, and trigonometry. So, I mean, I know some math. I'm not a big fan of derivatives, frankly, because as I pointed out, it's very dangerous to say, because in one circumstance two things equal each other, that in all circumstances those two things equal each other. That's really dangerous. I love it when his math explanations quickly terminate with blah, blah, blah. So that's obviously never happened. Even I can do that kind of math. Well, go ahead. Let me see you make a video where you explain anything. Take any formula and explain it. Take it apart in any way whatsoever. Oh, but you never did that. It's funny how we never actually see him do any, because I don't think physics is math. I think physics is understanding relationships between objects. That's what physics is. Physics is a physical thing. It's not a mathematical thing. Math is just another way of describing the physical universe in that you can formalize. See the word formula, formalize. That is, you can take the essential bits and create mathematical symbols and components to understand the essential bits. Now, this argument involves whether the essential bit is mass and velocity. That's the essential bit of something's capacity to do work in the universe. That's the proposal. You're claiming that you should square the velocity, that the velocity is much more important than the mass of the object. I'm saying there isn't a single piece of evidence that makes that make any sense at all. Now, that's the simple point. So why don't you ground your mathematical understanding, explain why you think squaring the velocity, VMV, makes good sense. Why don't you explain how that bigger volume it creates, right? I mean, it's creating a gigantic volume based on the extra velocity you're creating. So explain to me how that extra velocity is distributed to other objects. I've explained that all I can give is my velocity to things. And I'm going to give it based on my mass interacting. My mass is carrying the bags of velocity. So all my little bits inside of me, all my atoms, are carrying a bag of velocity. Now, if I have a whole bunch of atoms with a little bit of velocity in each bag, it takes them more energy, more work, so to speak, more time to pour the energy into something because it's all a bunch of little bags pouring energy. And if I have big bags of energy, they can dump it really quickly. I can distribute a lot of energy very quickly if I have a high velocity. Do you understand that concept? Why don't you draw me your picture of how energy moves through the universe? Turd. Okay, anyway. I mean, none beyond 5 plus 5, etc. So just gratuitous ad hom nonsense. All right. I did a ridiculous 4-hour reply. So who believes this? No, nobody. The ridiculous part, yes. 4 hours, no. To his latest piece of crap, but I'm not sure whether I want to upload it. So more of this crap. So he said he did the big giant wheels rolling down those onto his pool table bullshit experiment. Never published it. Said it proves him right again, and he's right, and he's proven it, and blah blah blah. Never showed it. Never any evidence he even did it. Okay, so just more talk, no walk. He spent 4 hours, quote mining. He doesn't spend 4 hours answering anything. Too long, really. So why would it be too long? Why would you let your viewers decide? You've posted one video in 2 months. You think they can't handle the video? Go ahead and post it, retard. Still, if it forces Gary to waste 4 hours of his life, like he routinely wastes that much time and more of hours every week. Yeah, that's right. Well, perhaps it's worth it. Yes, that's the whole point. His argument requires you to do this. You have to invest time in making arguments. You're arguing for what I'm arguing is fallacious nonsense. Okay, that there's some that Newton was wrong. Do you understand the real point here? I mean, you really don't, do you? You really think that this is Newton's physics somehow, right? Even though you don't know anything about math, you think really Newton was clueless. He was a fool because he didn't recognize this special extra stuff. Now, even though Newton was alive when Leibniz proposed it, I mean, Leibniz actually proposed it a year before Newton published his big thesis. So, but let's understand, he proposed, Leibniz was kind of a thief, and he already knew what Newton was going to be saying, so he was just trying to up Newton again. He was trying to one-up him because Newton has spent years working on this, and everybody knew Newton was working on it. It's the only thing Newton worked on for like 7 years, so Newton was silent to the world for like 7 years, so everybody knew this big thing was coming out. And Leibniz tried to steal the thunder with this crap. And clearly Newton said it's crap, okay? But Newton, like Darwin, didn't like to personally argue. So he had his minions do the argument for him with Leibniz. And clearly Leibniz lost the argument. So let's not be confused again. Leibniz had to be charity buried. Okay, nobody showed up at the funeral. Newton was buried as God. I mean, frankly, the God of science. So clearly Newton won the argument, the first round. And it wasn't until the silly girly physics part happened, where the rich girl got to steal the show. And she did a bad scientific show. And you say she was a great scientist, yet you won't be able to explain to me her great science. What was her great contribution? What did she actually contribute? Can you give me any kind of argument about how she added any perspective beyond believing in free will and other kinds of mushy shit? Anyway, you have a good one too, John, whatever that means. Just pathetic. Let's see if there's anything else here. You're a little slow. We already did that. Where's his, see if he edited it. No, there was some other stupid comment somewhere. So I don't know. I know it's here somewhere. But anyway, who cares? We'll just let that go. Alright, so I'll just play the Professor Lewin thing and we'll be done with this video. Alright, here's the clip. So this is where he's describing the vectors. And the point is the higher velocity, essentially. So he's using momentum, but he's really talking about vectors. It seems like I played this before, but we'll play it again. Just because it just points out how this doesn't make any sense. So he's using momentum to illustrate, but he won't illustrate kinetic energy. Only whenever he's doing something that requires geometry, it's always about momentum. And it's only when he's not drawing anything that he starts talking about kinetic energy.
This P total of the system, that is never going to change.
Welcome to your wildest cravings come true.
It really is annoying. Oof. Physics professor has to steal a little extra money.
And therefore, if you do this angle theta, and you know P1 and you know P2, then you can calculate
the
vectorial sum of these two, which is this. That is P.
So I understand. That's what I was trying to illustrate. Is this the longer arrow is the arrow is always going to stay close to the longer one. So the longer your velocity vector can be, the more likely it is you're going to keep the energy going in the same direction you're going, which means it's going to be easier to go that way because there's more stuff going that way. If I push the soldier in front of me into the Nazi, right? I push him into him, then I don't have to fight that Nazi. He'll fight him for me. So he's, in a sense, working towards my cause. And then I push him into the next one. And, I keep winning because the momentum keeps going in the same direction.
Total of the system, that is never going to change. That's before and after the collision, exactly the same.
So this is that part where he does this nonsense of saying there's no momentum in the beginning and then there's no momentum when two things are leaving with the same momentum. The system has zero momentum. Well, obviously it doesn't have zero momentum. If there's something going this, if I take a gun and I was even thinking, another experiment would be kind of interesting if they put a gun on the air track. Put the gun on the air track and then shoot the gun and see if it changes the velocity of the bullet. And you'll clearly see the recoil of the gun. You can measure it much more accurately. And are there any differences? Is there a different amount of energy going one way than there is the other way? And there isn't.
And therefore, if you do this angle theta, and you know P1 and you know P2, then you can calculate in what direction the object are going to slide. But of course, you can also calculate then the velocity after the impact, because this total momentum must be the sum of the total of the two cars, the mass of the two cars, times v prime.
Right, and all this would mean nothing if it wasn't absolutely true that this is the energy of the experiment, right? So the energy is the momentum. The energy is going to be traceable as momentum. So this is the part where you're saying yes. So why didn't you just stop here? Why are you going to add this silly kinetic energy notion when you're clearly drawing these as vectors, and the vectors are just going to be velocity vectors because we're not really changing the mass?
And so you can calculate everything, and that's what the police is doing when they find wrecks on the road. They actually use the skidding tracks of the wreck to calculate v prime, and then they can try to reconstruct the situation as it.
Right, and it's only going to be momentum that's going to move things. It's going to be little bits hitting little bits and exchanging their momentum. There is no exchange of any kinetic energy.
Was before the collision. Now, in all these cases, the objects stuck together. We've only
So again, this really doesn't matter. The sticking together, not sticking together. You're just talking about how you're going to dissipate your energy. And the fact is that slow things can't make things go fast. So, slow things can't give a lot of velocity. They can't give more velocity than they have. So if I can run 30 miles an hour, I can push something 30 miles an hour. I can't push it 60 miles an hour. So the limitation is, unless there's some pulleys or some other mechanism, I, as a slow thing, can't give fast velocities away. I can only give these, the velocity I got. I can only give the speed I have. So the faster I'm going, clearly it's so much easier to give away more energy in clumps because I can go fast, hit something heavy, and give it a lot of momentum. So momentum moves freer from fast things than from slow things, but there isn't more of it. It's just how fast can you pour it out? How fast can you distribute it? And the slower you're going, the longer it takes you to give away your momentum.
considered cases where they stick together, in which case we call those in physics completely inelastic collisions. Now, next lecture, I will also deal with situations.
So again, this was talked about in the 1600s. Leibniz, to his credit, was also a believer. Descartes was the one who really established this was the rule. Okay, this conservation of energy. The universe already has its energy in it. It's already moving around, and everything is already moving. Everything always has conservation of momentum because every bit of momentum is moving and it's going somewhere. It was somewhere and it will be somewhere. The energy can be followed through billions of years of movement through the universe. So the energy is always real. And it's always moving just to different locations in the universe, and that's it. There's no other, and so he's not getting that simple argument. He's not even understanding what conservation means, in the sense that conservation means that it's in the system. You're not talking about, transferring it between two objects, yes, but if you didn't transfer it, it went into the other environment. It went going that way, it's going that way, it's going some other way, but it's always there. And there's no evidence that kinetic energy is doing that. There's every evidence that that's what momentum is doing.
Whereby, during the collision, the particles bounce off each other.
So there's no bouncing off of each other. There's obviously, you have to push and something has to push back. It has to reflect, and that's again a concept of it has to move. It still has to do something, and something else has to happen. There always has to be the equal and opposite reactions, all of that crap, in the sense that if you give it away, you stop. If it has it, it's moving. These are all the rules, and so, but you can just, again, you just follow the energy, follow it.
In completely inelastic collisions, you always lose kinetic energy. Sometimes a little, as you see there. Sometimes a lot, as you see there.
So lose to what? There is no explanation of what you lost it to. They just vaguely say deformation and heat. Well, those are real things, and they're real things you can measure, but they have no experiment where they measure any of that. So again, there's no evidence that when I dropped the weight on the train, that the train deformed and that there was a whole, half the energy of the movement was lost somewhere. There's no half the energy lost anywhere.
Sometimes everything, as you see there. Always in inelastic collisions do you lose kinetic energy.
Using websites that are accessible.
So it's like I said, this is really terrible that he has all these ads on these videos. Terrible.
By means of excessivity or otherwise, it empowers us.
Terrible.
Can we have in a collision an increase of kinetic energy? Well,
So does this make any sense, right? An increase in kinetic energy. So we're making free energy now. Can we make free energy? But his example is so silly because he's obviously creating a source of energy. The energy isn't free. He's just saying there's more going one way than it's going the other way. And because he doesn't count any counter. He doesn't count. I'll let him do it. I mean, this explosion argument is so silly.
it depends on how you define the word collision. The answer is yes. And in fact, I will show you an example and even do a demonstration. In the most simple case that I can think of, I have here a block which has a certain mass m. But there is an explosive inside. And all of a sudden it goes boop.
So this has nothing to do with a collision. This is now he's adding a new circumstance, a completely different environmental circumstance, and he's this is just so he's adding a chemical reaction to this action. So yes, there's no momentum for this objects because at the moment there's no energy is being exposed to them. But if I explode something, clearly they're going to be exposed to the explosion. So of course they're going to gain momentum from the explosion. But there won't be zero momentum. Well, he's going to say it, so I'll just show how stupid this is.
Well, before the speed is 0, and so the momentum is 0. And there comes the...
So clearly the momentum would be, if it was a compressed spring, which he's going to show, right? Then we know the momentum is in the compressed spring. The spring has the momentum in it. It has the capacity to move. So we know that's, it's silly to say we don't know where the energy came from, whether there's 0. Because we know it's there in the spring.
Bang, and one piece flies in this direction with a certain velocity v2 prime. This is m2. And another piece flies off in this direction with mass m1 with velocity v1 prime. Clearly, momentum must be conserved. This explosion is only internal forces. And so you can write down, if you call this...
So this is where, he's disagreeing overtly with Pirro. So he's saying it's got to be conserved, so whatever the mass to velocity ratios will have to be the same, and so you just proportionally, if you go half the velocity in one direction, you're going twice the velocity in the other. No way of getting around that.
Increasing direction of x, so this momentum is positive, and this momentum is negative. The total...
So again, he gives these assignments to momentum, and yet he doesn't assign the same exact... You're making the same argument. You're saying the two objects have kinetic energy. They obviously have kinetic energy in a specific direction that is opposite each other, so why don't you just say the kinetic energy is, canceled?
Momentum will never change. It's the same before as it is afterwards, so this must be m2 times v2 prime minus m1 times v1 prime. What happened with the kinetic energy? Well, kinetic energy has clearly increased. There was 0 kinetic energy to stop.
So he's only saying it's increased because he's saying one side has, we calculate one side to have more kinetic energy by some arbitrary idiotic notion, and therefore that extra means it went from 0 to having that extra. But the two parts that canceled don't mean anything. So the only kinetic energy it has is a tiny fraction of extra. So if it was 200 joules moving one way and 200 joules moving, and 400 by kinetic energy moving the other way, the only part they would count is the 200 difference. The 200s would cancel, and all you'd have is the extra from the 400, so you'd have 200. So there'd only be 200 joules of energy in the whole system, which means each object would only have 100 joules. See, it doesn't make any sense.
Start with. This one now has kinetic energy, and this one has kinetic energy. Where did that come from? Well, it was the chemical reaction of the explosion. Momentum, however, was conserved.
So the chemical reaction of the explosion means little atoms and bits of atoms were shot at very high velocities into the objects, and their very high velocities were transferred. The momentum of those little tiny particles was transferred to the object, and the object gained momentum. Clearly, that's what happened. The momentum of the little pieces of the explosion, the bits flying off the explosion, the atoms and photons and everything that came off the explosion interacted with the substance, and in interacting with it gave it its momentum. The little pieces hit it, they lost momentum, they gave it to the big piece. That's how the explosion works, by transferring momentum.
He doesn't care about these explosions. That's all internal forces. So be very careful. Never confuse momentum with energy.
Yeah, never. It's just so silly. Never confuse it with energy. Therefore, don't think of it at all. Because what could it possibly mean if it isn't energy? If your momentum isn't your ability to move things, then what is it? How can it mean anything? Why would I say the snowball has momentum coming down the mountain? Why would I bother even saying it if it doesn't mean it has the capacity to flatten the building?
Energy can change or cannot change, can increase or decrease or remain the same kinetic energy. But if there are no external forces on the system, momentum is always conserved.
So more mush. And all that really is saying is that explosions are always, the same energy goes this way as it goes that way. Duh. Okay. Yeah, yes, the explosion, unless you rig it so it all goes one way, like a laser beam or something, you force all the light to go one way. But otherwise, that's what's going to happen. And that's Newton's third law, essentially. So anyway, it's just complete mush. There's no drawing of the kinetic energy, no explanation for how this one thing with the same momentum, we have two things leaving with the same momentum, yet this one has twice as much energy. And there's just zero evidence, or 1,000 times. In the case of the bullet and the gun, they're saying this thing has 1,000 times more energy, 1,000 times more joules. And yet there's no way you could ever collect it. There's no way you could understand how it could possibly transfer it. Anyway. All right, so that's enough. Okay, so, sorry about my allergic problem, whatnot, throat problem. Till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. I mean, I've said before, all I can do is reason with you. I can't by myself make the world change. You want better science, you're going to have to do some of the work. Frankly, you're going to have to force them. You're going to have to force the ivory tower talkers to sing a better Allah song. This is sing a better religious song. Anyway, start reading Darwin. Quit doing this bandwagonism. This really bad science. Ugh. Anyway, till the next time and such.